G'day, I'm Sharyn and welcome. Today I'm going to show you how to do a faux Chanel trim as a neckline, or you could do it to finish off sleeves on stretchy fabrics. It's not too hard to do, it's the one I use most often. Let's get started. With both shoulder seams sewn, this is the back of the neck. It doesn't matter to me where I start this on the back of the neck. I'm just going to start it somewhere on the back of the neck. I've got a strip of the fabric that's about 2 inches wide, and a lot of that's going to get cut off, but it's easier to have it that wide to start with and worry about cutting it off at the end rather than trying to do things with a small amount of fabric and then having everything become complicated. I'm going to fold the end under and put it right sides together with the back of the neck, somewhere along there. I don't care, I could put it on the shoulder if I wanted to. I'm just going to put it on the back of the neck. I go in with the sewing and then what I'm aiming to do is have this piece of fabric come together with the edge of the neckline. And once the needle's in it, which it is now, I am going to put a tiny bit of tension on this. So I'm not talking about doing a huge pull on it, I'm talking about a little bit of tension. And stitching along. I'm on the back of it at the moment, I'm coming to the front. I'm going to turn my seam towards the back and I'm going to keep doing what I just said. So it's a tiny bit of tension on that top fabric. And I just keep going around, but not a lot of tension. I'll show you in a minute what happens if you do too much tension. Now it's got a bit stuck on the shoulder seam, so I'm just going to give it a help to get over that. Keep working my way around this neckline. So the fabric underneath is not stretched at all, only the fabric on the top, and it's not stretched much. It's just a very, very slight amount of tension. So I'm arranging this at each time with the cut edge close to where I'm going and then a little bit of tension on it. I am also making sure that I cut off a tiny bit of the fabric as I'm sewing around, and I'm doing that on purpose. If I moved away from the cut edge and then I ended up with a smaller amount of fabric in the seam, that will actually muck up the nice even Chanel trim that I want to get. So cutting off that little bit of fabric does a couple of good things for me, but one of them is making sure my seam is the same width the whole way around. I'm coming up to the other shoulder, and once again I'm going to put the fabric heading towards the back of the garment, not the front. So that would be no tension at all. That's a little bit of tension. You can see where the red is moving. Just a little bit. I made this a few weeks ago and I pulled too hard on a fabric on the binding that was quite strong and not very stretchy. And the result was that that binding has pulled the neck up like it's gathered it. I'm going to have to do this again because it's pulled it and it doesn't sit properly on me. Make sure you're not pulling too hard. Here's where I started. You can see where I had the initial part folded over, and now what I'm going to do is come just a bit past that and then I'm going to cut a bit across here, not all the way off. And follow through and then off. Now, under most circumstances, I would be tying that off, but this kind of finish, I don't really need to. There's the bit where I cut halfway across that piece of tape, and I'll cut across the rest of it now through the neck hole. You can see there's my binding, and my binding is a little bit smaller. If it was big, it would be opening out further, but it's that little bit smaller than the neckline because I put that slight bit of tension on it. We then move over to the sewing machine and use a straight stitch. I'm going to be using my sewing machine as a free arm machine. If yours is not free arm, it's not a problem. Keep your garment inside out and just work through the inside of the neck hole. If you've got the free arm, you can put the neck around the free arm. Before I start sewing a lot, I'm going to put this piece over into the back, around the overlocking. And I'm going to come back an inch or so. And we're just on a straight stitch at the moment, and what I want to do is stitch right in this ditch. So if you're a quilter, you'll know what I mean by stitching in the ditch, and basically it's stitching between this piece of fabric and this piece of fabric. Now I can take that out and cut it off. The reason I do that little bit of stitching is that when I start, it's very hard to grab hold of all of the necessary pieces of fabric. So by doing that bit, it is nicely wrapped around my overlocking, and now it's quite easy for me to put this one over and wrap it firmly around my overlocking as well. If I don't have that bit done first, it's quite difficult to get them all to line up and look nice. So now I can go back, and the whole object of this is that the overlocking goes to the right, and I take the narrow strip that I added, fold it around firmly and under. You can do it if you've got stripes and make the fold further out, but the very fact that I'm keeping this with the overlocking will mean that it's even the whole way around the neckline. Now I'm stretching that as I sew, and it wants to wiggle. Make no mistake about it, it wants to wiggle, but I'm trying to keep as close to that binding as I can. I am giving a little bit of a stretch to it again, a bit more than I did when I was putting this fabric on. That will help it if you have a tight neckline that you need to pull hard to get over your head. It will help it if you've stretched it a bit when you were sewing this down. When you get back to the beginning, you can either do a lock stitch or just stitch over the original stitching a bit. If the thread doesn't super well match the fabric, you will see it. but if it does match well, you won't see it. And most of the time on fabrics that are busy, you won't see it, but even on ones like this will move over, and honestly these things are just not that noticeable. To finish it off, at the moment on the inside we've got this big piece of extra fabric. All you do is cut it off. I just started that the wrong way, but what I tend to do is hold in my non-dominant hand, and I'm holding both the garment and the binding out of the way and just trim it away. This does not need to be exact. These fabrics tend not to ladder in these circumstances, and I have actually been making necklines like this since the 1970s with no problems, and that's what you do. As a rule, I'm making my tops out of 98% cotton, 2% spandex now, and they're easier to do because they don't slip around so much. The place where the t-shirts usually give up the ghost is at the binding, but it's around that edge that folds over and the fabric actually deteriorates. Let's have a look at some other tops that I have made using this method. On this one, I deliberately stitched on the chenille trim, and that gives like a top stitched edge, which would be more visible, but on this particular fabric it doesn't show up much anyway. On this one I've stitched in the ditch on white, but mostly you can't see it unless I try to make it visible. This fabric is a bamboo, and with a good match of thread to the fabric you really can't see anything at all. This trim also works really well if you want to use a contrast colour. So the one I was doing today I could have done in a matching red, a matching blue, or a white, as well as doing the self trim. I will put a black trim. If I've got a pattern that has got a black background, I will put a white trim sometimes. Sometimes I just do something that means that a top will go with a different item in my wardrobe. It is really an excellent way of trimming necklines, armholes in sleeveless garments, and the ends of sleeves. I hope you've learned something today, and I shall see you next time.